Something Lisa Frankenstein does is showcase a particular type of romantic film. That would be monster movies where the leading lady is in love with the quote unquote monster rather than a regular guy, as opposed to monster movies of decades past where the leading ladies were often won over by or already with a leading man who was often the one to give the killing blow to the perceived monster and depicted as heroic for doing so. Other examples of this would be 2017's The Shape of Water, which was essentially an alternate take on Creature from the Black Lagoon, released in 1954, where that movie followed suit with the other monster films of the era, with the monster being killed by the end, usually having unrequited love for the leading lady. The Shape of Water changed the story so that the creature was sympathized with heavily, as well as the leading lady loving him back. Eliza, who is mute, feels like an outcast in the not so disability friendly environment of the early 1960s that the film takes place in, therefore, on some level, relating to the creature. Director Francis Coppola created a much more romantic version of Dracula, which was released in 1992. There had already been several adaptations of the Bram Stoker novel before this, but this particular version leaned into the romantic aspect, with specifically Dracula the character, more so than any other had up until that point. With Lisa Frankenstein, since the creature is a reanimated corpse put back together using parts from other bodies, you could compare it to the original Frankenstein films from Universal Studios as an example of the trope of the monster dying without love being flipped on its head. Even though we see lots of imagery of Frankenstein's creature and the bride together in popular Gothic and Halloween media, in the actual film Bride of Frankenstein from 1935, they were never a couple. In fact, the bride rejected the creature because she was afraid of him. Yet, despite that, the two of them have burned into pop culture as one of the iconic images of spooky love. Some notable examples of this being Lily and Herman from the Munsters, a happily married couple who are very clearly modeled after the bride and the creature. Also, both the live-action Frankenweenie from 1984 and the 2011 stop-motion animation remake feature a poodle resembling the bride as the love interest to Sparky, aka the film's titular Frankendog. I even have a heart-shaped pin with the creature and the bride, despite knowing the actual outcome of the film. The three main films I'm discussing, as well as others out there, share a similar theme, which is turning away from the overall narrative that monster movies used to have in the golden age of Hollywood. Those films treated the various creatures as unnatural mistakes or anomalies that modernity would eventually mow down, and there is a lot of subtext to go into that alone. Lindsay Ellis did a video essay talking about it years back that explains that point very well. To give a simplified summary of her main points, outcasts and minorities can often feel more sympathy for or relate to the creatures since they are treated with the otherness the way that marginalized groups are often treated. I, for example, can relate on being treated with otherness for being a girl who grew up neurodivergent and did not know about it until the age of 20. Because of the subtext in those older monster films, it makes perfect sense that many would take issue with the perceived monsters being killed and or having unrequited love by the end. Although many people simply don't know how The Bride of Frankenstein plays out, considering there's just as many out there who don't know Frankenstein was the name of the scientist, not the creature. The other huge reason why the bride and the creature are seen depicted as in love and happy together is because of how many people, including myself, feel about the film's original message. We reject the idea of the creature being rejected. We reject the idea that the perceived monster has to die, let alone die unloved. Sympathy for the creatures, although definitely seen in decades prior, often didn't go as far as suggesting perhaps the creature could actually have a love interest or get the girl. However, the famous photo of Marilyn Monroe with the vent underneath her blowing up her white dress was taken from a scene in the movie The 7-Year Itch from 1955. In that same scene, the character Marilyn plays is exiting a movie theater with her date, talking about a monster movie they just watched. She goes on to express sympathy for the creature, saying, "Didn't you just love that picture? I did, but I felt so sorry for the creature at the end." To which her date responds, "You felt sorry for the creature. Why? Did you want him to marry the girl?" She goes on to explain, "He was kinda scary looking, but he wasn't really all bad. I think he just craved a little affection, that sense of being needed and wanted." And her date replies back, "That's a very interesting point of view." In Lisa Frankenstein, there is some narrative use of unrequited love. The beginning of the film shows the creature before he died in a paper doll style animation. We see him falling in love with a woman who then leaves him for someone else. While sitting on a bench near a large tree contemplating by himself, we see he is struck by lightning, and that's how he dies. His grave is marked as unmarried. Lisa's backstory involves having seen her mother die horrifically, and as a result, she developed selective mutism as a coping mechanism. The film starts with her father already having remarried, and Lisa living with her dad, stepmother, and stepsister. Lisa feels like an outcast for her method of dealing with trauma, as well as grim interests. We can see many references to famous silent films with creepy imagery in her bedroom and in a dream sequence of hers. She spends time at the local abandoned cemetery where she mostly talks to the grave who would later become the creature. She expresses, "I wish I was with you," meaning it as wanting to be dead in the ground rather than a romantic longing. She's established to already have a crush at school by this point. When lightning strikes the grave and the man from the beginning is resurrected, he goes to find Lisa, having overheard her comment about wanting to be with him, and tries to explain that's why he followed by attempting to kiss her hand when she asks him why he's in her home. She explains right away what she actually meant, and he starts to cry, already having been rejected once before he died. The moment is played for a joke when Lisa points out his tears smelling really bad. Despite that she doesn't accept his affection at first, he still protects and shows affection for her. After she starts to make him whole again by replacing various lost body parts of his, such as an ear and a hand and something else, we start to see the chemistry between them, particularly in a scene where he tests out his new hand by playing the living room piano, and also a scene where, out of excitement for becoming more complete with body replacements, he takes hold of Lisa and begins to do an old-timey dance with her, spinning her around for good measure. Once it's revealed Lisa's crush from school is sleeping with her stepsister, Lisa finally lets herself fully embrace the subtle feelings she'd been developing for the creature. Another huge reason why monster romances tend to go over well with a lot of ladies is because of the desire for a very specific type of love interest. The bad boy who isn't actually bad. Well, this doesn't always mean they're actually good, and a complete subversion of expectation, as a lot of the male characters in this trope fall into a more morally gray area. The male leads in Lisa Frankenstein and Coppola's Dracula straight up commit murders that are not out of self-defense, which their leading ladies, although not completely unreactionary to, definitely excuse them for doing. But the idea is relatively still the same. The spooky guy with the nice gothic aesthetic who is actually a big softie, or maybe he's not a softie but will be only for his special lady. The brooding outcast who is not actually outcast for being completely bad, but rather being misunderstood. When your quote unquote bad boy is not actually completely bad on the inside, just seen as bad on the outside because they are different or monstrous looking in some way or another, you get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to have the bad boy with very little, if any, of the actually bad stuff that could lead to falling into the I can change him trope. That's also something monster romances flip on its head. In stories that are monster movie adjacent, such as Beauty and the Beast, we see a transformative aspect, wherein by loving the beast, Beauty is rewarded with a handsome prince in the end, both presenting the ideas that one, you can change someone if you love them hard enough, and two, falling in love with the monster is fine, but don't think you can be married or anything intimate unless they become visually acceptable to society. Once again, yes, there is a deeper subtext to that about how people who are conventionally unattractive or those who have deformities are treated by the general public. Films like The Shape of Water do not include a transformation scene of amphibian man becoming a regular man or Eliza turning into a fish woman. The ending scene does feature amphibian man turning Eliza's neck scars into gills so they can stay together in the water, but that transformation is done for function, not appearance. Neither of the two need to change, nor do either of the two want the other or themselves to change in order to stay together. Coppola's Dracula doesn't go as far as a sex scene between Mina and her undead vampire prince Vlad, but the film does frame the blood drinking scene between the two as quite an erotic and consensual experience. The other two I've been mentioning, The Shape of Water and Lisa Frankenstein, actually go there, and by go there I mean they go all the way. These films reject the idea that the monstrous looking love interest has to transform in order to continue being with their leading ladies, even in intimate matters. In Lisa Frankenstein, although yes, the leading man does transform in the sense that every time he gets one of his missing body parts replaced, he becomes a bit less undead, but he is still very much not a regular living man during the scene where himself and Lisa make love. There's even a joke about him still technically being a corpse when what looks like a worm falls out of his hair, which he casually removes from the bed before they begin. Eliza loves Amphibian Man the way he is, and the film does not dance around the fact that they consummate their relationship. Eliza even explains to a friend and coworker of hers how Amphibian Man's genitalia works. Fun fact, a friend of mine told me one of his best memories with his grandma before she passed away was seeing this film with her in the theater, and when the love scene came up, his grandma said out loud, "She's not gonna fuck it, is she?" The Shape of Water particularly marked a cultural milestone for these unique love stories, because although there were many existing pieces of media wherein the human character in love with the monster character would be intimate, The Shape of Water was the first mainstream film to actually have the balls to go there rather than just implying it. The film went on to be nominated for multiple Oscars and won 4 Academy Awards, proving even on a critical level, films like this that dare to push the boundaries in an unorthodox way are appreciated. When it comes to implications of sex in gothic or spooky media, there's something else I think is worth mentioning. During the 1960s, television sitcoms across the board were beginning to solidify the trope of the husband and wife long over their honeymoon phase, with most of these shows having their main couple seemingly constantly annoyed at each other, with even the more happy couples cracking jokes like the old ball and chain. The show that was supposed to depict a strange and opposite from normal family featured a spooky couple who loved each other more than words can describe. I'm, of course, talking about the first Addams Family adaptation that ran from 1964 to 1966. Gomez and Morticia from this adaptation were the first mainstream television couple to have implied having a sex life with each other. Outside of sex, in general, they are one of the earliest examples of a healthy marriage, still alive and passionate years after the wedding and having kids, when most other shows of the time would fall short depicting their main couple being overall satisfied with their union. Despite that the Addams were supposed to be the polar opposite from normal in every way, their dynamic in the show and the way they all support each other is much closer to a healthy family dynamic than what you'd get from other shows of the era. The Addams Family films from the 1990s in particular took many opportunities to highlight Gomez and Morticia's passionate relationship, probably the reason why they're still considered such an iconic couple today. I know that the Addams Family are technically just weird and not traditional monsters like the Munsters, for example. The closest we get to that is the hints in more than one of the adaptations that Morticia is descended from one or multiple witches. I use the Addams Family as an example because, like Lily and Herman Munster or The Bride and the Creature, they are heavily ingrained in depictions of Gothic love. And one of the reasons they are such a popular pair is the fact that it was not purely acting. Angelica Houston, who played Morticia in the 90s films, fell in love with Raul Julia, who played Gomez. She did not confess this to him due to him being married. When Raul passed away from stomach cancer around the time the second film was released, Angelica outright refused to do any more Addams Family films since that would mean the part of Gomez being recast. In the 1960s sitcom, Gomez is played by John Astin and Morticia by Carolyn Jones. John and Carolyn both fell in love with each other, and this passion can be seen in their performances on the show. However, it was not until later, when Carolyn was dying from colon cancer in 1983, that the two finally confessed with each other, reportedly. Luckily, they did have some time together before she passed. John Astin is currently 94 years old. Angelica Houston is 72. So we have one Gomez without his Morticia and one Morticia without her Gomez. Falling for the character coded with some type of otherness when you yourself might feel like an outcast is pretty common. Falling for characters with a dark aesthetic without actually desiring genuine evil from them is one of the reasons why enemies to lovers or anti-heroes have the amount of fans they do. So maybe, despite old Hollywood's depictions, the ladies aren't terrified to be carried off by the perceived monster after all. Before I wrap this up, I also want to commend Lisa Frankenstein for expectation subversion outside of the love story. Although Lisa's stepmother does fit the evil stepmom trope to a T, the stepsister Taffy is actually very sweet and genuine. She sticks up for Lisa and looks after her multiple times in the film. During the scene where the creature is attacking Lisa's high school crush after he's rejected her, the creature turns to begin swinging the axe at Taffy before Lisa stops him. Lisa has one more conversation with Taffy before running off to the creature for the scene where their love becomes mutual. Lisa acknowledges that she misjudged Taffy and wrote her off as superficial and uncaring simply because her mother was, and because Taffy in some ways resembles the girls who would usually bully Lisa. Lisa does acknowledge the nice things Taffy has done for her and says she does in fact see her as her sister before saying goodbye. After Lisa takes her own life to escape legal repercussions for crimes she and the creature committed, Taffy does go to visit her grave. unknowing that Lisa is not actually buried there since the creature has resurrected her to be together, but nonetheless, we see Taffy for sure cares and it was never an act. The film didn't have to take time to set up the dynamic between the two sisters in order to switch up the way these scenarios typically play out, but I feel the movie was much stronger for it. I hope you all enjoyed this video essay and found it to be interesting and or informative. Thank you for watching, and for returning viewers, I will see you next time.